we, for some reason, let down to 13,000 feet over Stuttgart, Germany, and they hit us with flak and fighters, and they took the last 3 out of our squadron out.
They knocked down 3 planes.
8 missions you were lucky, 10 somebody up there liked you, 25 was almost an impossibility.
The plane blew up and I got knocked out.
Welcome to Air Combat Journal. Today's journal entry features B-17 tail gunner Kelly Martinson. This is part 1 in a 2-part series featuring Kelly. If you were ever wondering what it took to become a B-17 gunner, Kelly goes into great detail about the Army Air Corps' gunnery training program. Kelly was shot down on his 16th mission, and he talks about what it was like bailing out of the stricken B-17 and then attempting to evade capture. Kelly was caught in short order, and he spent the duration of the war as a POW, and he ended up on multiple forced marches across Germany as the Allies advanced. This is a compelling narrative of a typical B-17 gunner. This is your pilot, John Sermon, asking you to strap in and sit back. Air Combat Journal is ready for takeoff. What was your career path to tail gunner?
When I first went in, I didn't really think that much about flying, but I was a machinist. And so I thought I'd like to get in the mechanical end of it. And of course, my aptitude showed that's where I should be. That's what I asked for when I went in. And I was lucky enough to get it. And then of course we went through aircraft mechanics school, and I went through Lincoln, Nebraska, and they were asking for volunteers then for gunners. And I think about 2/3 of our class volunteered.
Gunnery school, a primer.
I think it was a very proud moment for me when we got through gunnery school and they gave us our wings. Because gunnery school was, you had to really pay attention, and you'd learned a lot there. And as I understand it, they washed out about 15% of the guys. But most of us made it through. The thing that always amazed me is that we had aircraft identification, and they'd flash a picture on the projector. I think it was 1/5 of a second or something like that. And you had to identify that plane. And it was always amazed me that we got so that we could identify planes in that short a time. We didn't have to identify many of them, just our own planes and the Germans and the Japs, and of course you ended up in one theater or the other. But it gets you could do that pretty good. Another part of gunnery school that was kind of interesting. Of course, we shot skeet almost every other day. I guess we'd have at least 25 rounds. And I had never shot a shotgun, although as a kid on a farm I had my own rifle when I was 9 years old, .22 rifle, but I'd never shot a shotgun. And it's kind of amazing how you can get so you can hit something if you practice enough. But the best I could ever shoot on skeet was 23 out of 25. And the interesting test was they had a regular racetrack there, and you stood on the back end of an open truck, and they had houses all around that racetrack, and they'd shoot birds out of those houses. And of course, you never know which way they were going, up, down, or crosswise, or what. The best I could ever do on that was, I think, 38 out of 50. That was a tough course.
That's still pretty incredible, though.
Yeah, and I think they traveled at about 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour. So it was tough shooting. I think all the gunnery schools and mechanic schools were pretty well standard. They had a lot of them around the United States. I went to Fort Myers, Florida for gunnery school. I went there I think I was there in July, August, and September, and it was so hot you couldn't believe it.
Did your gunnery training include aerial gunnery at towed sleeves?
Well, they used, my first flight in an airplane was at gunnery school. It took us up in an AT-6. That, of course, was the single engine plane, and the gunner sat in the back facing the tail. And on my first trip up, I guess the pilot wanted him to welcome me to the group, and he says, we were flying out over the water, and he says, you see that oil slick down there? I says, yeah. He says, that guy didn't make it. They like to scare you, you know. And the first trip out, we just, I think we fired 50 rounds into the water or something like that, just to get acclimated a little bit. And from then on, we went into, I think it was an old B-18 or something like that. And we fired at the screen sleeve, I should say, and it was towed by 86. And I don't know the exact size, but I think it was probably maybe 4 or 6 feet high and about 10, 12 feet long, something around that. But they'd get that thing out there so far, it looked like a cigarette paper, you know. You used to roll your own cigarettes, the cigarette paper it looked like, and it was hard to hit. And of course, most people know by now that they use different colored bullets. They'd paint the bullets red, green, or yellow, then they'd assign you a color. So when you got down, you know how much you hit the target. Sometimes it wasn't too much.
After graduation, how did you end up as a tail gunner on a B-17?
I was, sent to Mosley Lake, Washington to get on a crew for phase training, which took about 3 months. That was after gunnery school. And I was there about a week, and they called my name along with another gentleman, and they sent us to Geiger Field to be replacements for somebody that was sick or gone AWOL or something like that. And I joined the crew there in Geiger Field in Spokane, Washington. Well, when I reported to Geiger Field, reported to this crew, and I was supposed to be, I was assistant engineer, and I was supposed to be at that position be a waist gunner. But the rest of the crew was all filled, and the only thing left was a tail. So I said, I guess I'm a tail gunner. And actually, I was very happy afterwards that I made that selection because I liked it back there. Even though I was all alone, I still liked it.
The isolation of the tail gunner position.
Yeah, you were all by yourself back there, and the other crew had to kind of keep tabs on you in case you had a oxygen problem or something, because you know, if you lost your oxygen for any length of time, you were all done. But it was a kind of a lonely place, but I enjoyed it because I had a view, actually. I could view from one wick tip to the other. So it was, probably 100 or 200 degrees I could see. And of course, then I had a a real good view in the rear end. And we were, for several missions, we were leading the squadron.
What were your job responsibilities on your B-17?
Well, as an assistant engineer, you were to take over as engineer if something else happened. And the engineer spent a lot of his time behind the pilot and co-pilot, calling out different instruments and just watching how the engines were functioning and so forth. However, I was never called upon to do that duty. I stayed in the tail most of the time. I went through aircraft mechanics school in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we had different courses on different parts of the plane, like on the engine and the propellers and the controls and so forth. And I never was called upon to do any of that because our top turret gunner was always in good shape. So I never had to worry about that.
The first mission.
Well, we got to England, and we got to our squadron. Our bomb group was 305th Bomb Group at Chelveston, England, and we were in a 366 squadron. And we got there, we went over to Queen Mary and got to our 305th Bomb Group in November of 1943. And our baggage didn't catch up to us till the last part of December. So our first mission wasn't until January 4th, 1944. And our target was Kiel, Germany. And it was quite a first mission, not combat-wise, but everything else seemed to go wrong. Our navigator had a loss of oxygen, and they had to revive him. And our waist gunner also had a loss of oxygen, and they had to get him and tighten up his mask and get him in shape again. And they both lived to it fine. Myself, I was, of course, all by myself in the tail, and we flew over Kiel, Germany was our target, and that was submarine pens. And we, at one time, had to go over the clouds, and we went up as high as 32,000 feet to get over the clouds and to the target. And on the airplane, the temperature indicator was up front someplace, and it had a maximum of 70 degrees. And they tell me that the needle hit 70 and couldn't go any farther. So it was 70 below. And something went wrong with my heated suit. So I didn't have any heat except for the clothes I had on. And I beat my hands against the armor plate in front of me, beat my fingers against that. And of course I was sitting on a bicycle seat with my legs back like this and kneeling on my knees. And so I beat my feet into the bottom of the plane, but I froze my feet. Evidently not too bad because it didn't bother me for many years, but the last 7 or 8 years, I have hardly any feeling in my toes. And my hands get cold. If it's just chilly outside, my hands get real cold. And when I come in, they just sting like mad. So it didn't bother me at the time so much. But I never reported it when we got back from the mission because I didn't want to get grounded and lose the crew. And I had had some experience of that because when I was in aircraft mechanic school, I was in about 3 or 4 different classes because I had my childhood diseases in the Army. I had scarlet fever for 3 weeks once, and I lost a class. And then I had the mumps a few weeks later, and of course I lost another class. And then I had the same problem in gunnery school. But having gone through that, I didn't want to lose another crew, so I never reported it. I just kind of toughed it out. Now on that mission, our waist gunner, both our waist gunners, had frostbite on their cheeks because the plane we flew was a B-17F. Did not have the closed waist windows and did not have the front turret. Had the open waist windows, and it was a bad spot for the tail gunners, the waist gunners. So they both got frostbite. And I guess our navigator got some frostbite also. But the rest of the crew was fine.
Fighters and frozen guns.
We saw over the target that day, over Kiel, we saw 2 Ju-88s, but they must have been going for another group because they didn't bother us, thank goodness. Because it was so cold, a lot of our guns were froze up and wouldn't fire until we got down to lower altitude. So it was a very lucky thing for us. But of course we had the normal amount of flak over the target and everything else, but it was a kind of a long haul for a first mission.
German fighter tactics.
When I was flying, and this is kind of hard to believe, I never once had a fighter come in from the tail. They all came in from the nose, anywhere from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, high, lower level. We never had a fighter come in from the tail. And I was talking to our sister crew. I call them our sister crew because the enlisted men were on our barracks. And they were flying, when we were flying number 1, they were flying number 2 spot. I still see the tail gunner there, and I mentioned that to him. He says, that's absolutely right. He says, the only time that he had seen fighters come in from the tail is when they got shot out of formation and had to go back alone. But when we were in formation, they always came in from the nose. Now I'm sure that previous to our time there, in 43, they probably came in from the tail, and maybe afterwards. But the missions I was on never once came in from the tail. Actually, I wish they would have, because it wasn't much fun sitting there waiting to get hit in the back.
The dark side of the tail gunner's panoramic visual point of view.
I saw a lot of planes go down. Well, being in the tail, I saw, of course, had a fantastic view, and of course you'd see planes going down way far away that you could barely see them. But then, like we were on one mission where we, for some reason, let down to 13,000 feet over Stuttgart, Germany, and they hit us with flak and fighters, and they took the last 3 out of our squadron out. There was only left 3 of us to get back. But you'd see a lot of planes, and you'd see them going in at a steep dive, and you always counted parachutes and reported it. And you'd see rarely you'd see a plane go in a flat spin. And when they're in a flat spin, there's no possible way they can get out. And I've talked to people that in prison camp that happened to, and the only reason they got out is the plane broke in half, and then they just walked out the end they were in. But otherwise, that's a bad spin. And you'd see a lot of planes on fire, you know, and with several engines out. Sometimes they get the wing blown off, tail blown off. Just there was a case. I understand it was a true case of one of our planes was over the Alps, and this one guy lost his parachute, and he had no parachute to bail out, but he jumped anyway, and he landed on the steep side of the mountain and lived. Now, I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a good story.
The tail gunner's escape hatch.
Well, we had to crawl back around the tail wheel, but I had my own hatch back there, my own door. So if I had to get out, I could get out there, and that was only probably 5 feet from me. So I did have an exit. I don't know if did you talk to Wes Borgeson in our group? Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was another guy in one of my prison camps that same thing happened to him. Tail broke off from the rest of the airplane, and of course the tail is just like a couple of wings. It kind of made to fly, and the way he explained it to me is it just went down like this, and he landed in the trees and didn't get hardly hurt at all. It came down pretty easy. So there was a lot of crazy things that happened. This guy, as I remember, I got his name at home someplace. We called him Baldy. He was from Wisconsin someplace, but I don't remember the rest of his name.
A lucky crew.
Looking back on it, I think we were an exceptionally lucky crew because we got shot down on March 24th, 1944. Our target was Schweinfurt, Germany, which during the mission was changed to Frankfurt, Germany. It was the third time we'd hit for it, I guess. Up until that time, the only problem we ever had, it wasn't really a problem, is one night when we got back from a mission to the barracks, I was washing up in the barracks, and I took my shirt off, and I had blood running down my arm. Never even knew I'd been hit. And then I saw the tear in my sleeve, and of course, there was I found a piece of flak in the bottom of the aircraft that had hit me. But I never even knew it until it was just a nick, just enough to draw some blood. Of course, I got kidded about going for the air medal, but I never did. I didn't have the guts to do that. But up until the day we got shot down, we were very, very lucky because while a lot of crews on their first, second, or fifth mission would come back with a couple guys killed and guys wounded, we never had anybody wounded until the day we got shot down. And we were, like I said, our target was Frankfurt, Germany that day. And when we got over the target, we were leading the squadron. And we lost number one engine with the oil was pouring out of the engine. And so we had to drop off out of the lead and let the squadron go. So we dropped off, and we just dropped off, and we lost number 2 engine. Same thing, oil leak. Goodell, our top turret gunner, has often wondered if it wasn't sabotage, but it's hard to know. We went through a lot of flack too. But having only 2 engines, we started back by ourselves. And we lost a lot of altitude to begin with, and then we kept losing altitude going back, and we had to actually throw out all of our ammunition and all of our guns, and threw our flak suits. We threw anything we could find in the airplane that had any weight at all. We threw it out to keep the plane in the air. Pilot had requested that. I know I pleaded with him to let me keep my tail guns, but he said, no, we got to get rid of the weight, so we threw everything out. Only thing we had was a flare gun, I guess. And we got back to Belgium, going home, and we came down through the clouds, and 5 German Focke-Wulf 190s picked us up. And of course, they didn't know whether we were armed or not. And they came in, and he took a pass at us. They riddled us pretty good. And they killed our navigator, Leo Hartmann, on the first pass. I never saw him, but they tell me that he got a 20 millimeter right in the forehead, so he never knew what hit him, thank goodness. And our top turret gunner got his right foot shot almost off. I guess it was just hanging by a cord. And the rest of us enlisted men were in the back. I had been up in front before we got hit by fighters. I had been up in front to see if I could help out anyway with the navigator and the bombardier to help them get rid of some gear. But they had everything pretty well taken care of, so I went back in the tail. And kind of a funny incident, handled it. Shows you what maturity of a person will do. By the time I got back to the radio room, which had a door opening up to the waist area, and immediately in back of the radio room was the ball turret. Well, the ball turret gunner was out of the turret, of course, and when I went forward, they were trying to drop the ball turret, and they had no wrenches or anything, but they did have one gun left, one gun barrel left, and they told me later that they used that gun barrel to beat one of the big lug nuts off of the turret, and they finally dropped it. Well, when I got back to and opened the door to the waist, there was this big 4-foot hole, and I jumped over that, and my ball turret gunner, now he was 24 years old at the time. He was 5 years older than I was, and I always looked up to him, and I don't remember exactly what he said, but and he wasn't one to swear, but he says, "Where the hell is your parachute?" I said, "It's back in the tail." "Well, get your butt back there and get it." So when Pete talked, I listened. And I went back and got my chute. And I hung it on one side like we were instructed to do, and all the rest of the guys had theirs hung on. And it wasn't 2 minutes later than the fighters hit us. So I most likely would probably have been dead or wounded if I had to go back and get that chute, because it was like rain on a tin roof. And after the fighters found out that we had no guns, they came in and put their flaps down so they could slow them down and get more shots, and they just pumped it to us. And I'll never forget that picture. They came in about 10 o'clock level and just put their flaps down and just sit there and pump, pump, pump. And I looked at them for about a half a second and I hit the floor. And we were all on the floor at that time, all enlisted men. And I remember that somebody was ahead of me and he had his legs spread out like this. I put my head right up in his right up in his butt so I could get the protection. And I don't remember how many passes they took at us, but we finally got somehow got the word to bail out. And so we got up and got in line to bail out, and I was fourth in line. There was 5 of us back there. And somehow or other, the first guy in line hesitated, and they either had to coax him by pushing him or kicking him out. And in the meantime, my radio operator, who was the crew comic, he tried to go around and get ahead of me, and I said, "Get back, you son of a gun, and take your turn." We bailed out at 800 feet, and found out later that our pilot, co-pilot, and our top turret engineer, who had his foot badly shot, didn't get out till 400 feet, and they all lived to tell about it. Later on in prison camp, I saw my pilot and co-pilot. They were in, this camp was in Nuremberg, Germany, the 3rd camp I was in. And it was a kind of a lax camp as far as guards and so forth. And I was able to get through the fence into the officer's compound. And lo and behold, I got lucky and I found my pilot and co-pilot. But I didn't dare stay long. I just had a few words with him and left, because if I'd have got caught, I'd have been in a little bit of trouble.
The fate of the flight engineer with the injured foot.
Goodell is still living and he's doing great. When he bailed out, of course he tried to crawl into the woods. Donald Eddy, our co-pilot, came along, and we were so low that we landed close together, you know. My right waist gunner, my left waist gunner, landed 100 yards, less than 100 yards on each side of me. And Eddie came along and tried to help Goodell, but Goodell says, "Keep going, because you can't help me. I just have to wait for the Germans," which he did. And they took him to a farmhouse, and it was maybe 12, 14 hours before he got to any medical help at all. But he did get medical help later, and they took his leg off at the ankle, and now it's on up above the knee, but you never know it. He's played golf, played ball, everything, football ever since, and danced. You'd never know he had an artificial leg. And he's the type of guy that that works out and keeps in good shape.
Did you ever have any parachute training during your basic training?
No, we never had any practice. And of course, when I was transferred from Moses Lake to Spokane, Washington, I was supposed to have 3 months of phase training with the crew. Well, the crew was through with their phase training. So I missed all this phase training, and I missed a lot of things I should have had been trained for. But I don't think anybody had any training on bailing out that I know of. And of course, I think it was easy for us to bail out because there were fighters firing at us. So it was a place to go, the only place. So it was a wonderful experience, actually. When you jump out, you feel the prop wash. We bailed out of the right side of the airplane, and that's where we had the 2 engines. And you get the prop wash, it just washes you back like that. And the minute we got out of the prop wash, we just pulled the ripcord and swung about 3-4 times, and we hit the ground. And I hit the ground in a not too good a position. I hit with my feet in front of me, so I hit on my heels and my tailbone. And of course, I had just turned 20 years old 3 weeks before we got shot down. And when you're that age, that stuff doesn't bother you that much. And our instructions, of course, were to run as far from the aircraft as we could and try to get away, which we did. We probably ran for maybe a half hour. And but it's bothered me later in life now. My back is completely deteriorated down the number 4 and 5, and gives me a lot of trouble.
During your training, were you warned to avoid surrendering to civilians?
Well, as I recall, the idea was if you came down and there were civilians here and Germans here, soldiers, go to the soldiers, because there were some cases. In fact, I guess there were quite a few cases where civilians killed the airmen as they came down. And you know, when you stop and think about it, you couldn't really blame them because they just got the hell bombed out of them. And when that happens to you, you're gonna fight back, I guess.
On the run in Belgium.
When I came down, like I mentioned, I came down between 2 waist gunners. And, no, pardon me, that's wrong. 1 waist gunner and a radio man. So we all ran different directions. Well, when you're running like that, you don't know where you're going. You go around obstacles and so forth. And I wound up with my radio man. So we then went together. And we were running through a backyard. We were on the outskirts of Ghent, Belgium. That's spelled G-H-E-N-T. And of course it was occupied at that time by the Germans. And we're going through a backyard, and a Belgian stopped us. And he gave us each a raw egg and a bottle of beer, a short bottle of beer. So we cracked the egg, ate it raw, and drank the beer, and he says, "Get out of here." So we kept running. Well, we had to find some place to hide, so we found a haystack. And it was right next to a road, I'll never forget, lined with trees. It was a beautiful spot, actually. And we entered the haystack on the opposite of the roadside. And some people must have been in there before because we got into the haystack pretty easy. And we stayed in there for almost, I think it was about 2 days. And we didn't have any contact from anybody. We heard that we thought were German soldiers coming around, and they used pitchforks to try and see if anybody was in there. And we just stayed in the middle as good as we could and kept quiet, and they soon went away. And then about I think it was 7 o'clock the second night, with no contact from the Belgians, we decided we better try and get out of there and find some better place to hide and get something to, we were hungry, get something to eat and something to drink. We were kind of dumb, really. We should have probably stayed there, but we didn't. We left, and we tried to get around this town of Ghent. Now, by the time we decided to leave, it was dark, and we were in the Ghent, the town of Ghent was right close. We were in the outskirts, and we tried to get around the town, and it was so dark you couldn't see where you were going. And I remember we used to take turns going first. It was so dark. And one time it was Sage's turn to go first. And he came to a wall, and he jumped over the wall, and he jumped into some water. Now, I don't know if it was a sewer or what it was, but he sure smelled terrible from then on. And then we later on, we got into a street, and we were walking on the street, and we couldn't get out of it. There was no exits. And we could see people up ahead, about a block ahead of us. We were in a darkened area, but we could see people up there, and we saw that there looked like Belgian police. And they started walking down our way, so we looked for a place to hide. And the only thing we found was a doorway, and we tried to hide in the doorway. And they found us. And we found out they were Belgian police, and they thought, boy, we got it made. They're gonna put us up in a nice apartment upstairs someplace, and we can sweat out the war. Well, they took us to the police station, and I remember I took out my escape kit, and we were giving him chocolate and gum and stuff, and then a few minutes later we realized that they had made a phone call, and they weren't calling their wives, they were calling the Germans. So I know it was a dumb thing to do again as a kid. I got kind of ticked off, so I get up, and they had what you call an airtight stove there with a cover on the top. I got up and I took the cover off. I threw my escape kit in. I should never have done it, but I did, you know. And it wasn't long until the Germans come and got us. And they took us to a jail in Brussels. And actually, I think all of our crew, except of course Hartman and Goodell, who was wounded, wound up in that jail. I think even Goodell, I think, was there for a while. And we were there, Sage and I were there for about a week, and in solitary confinement. And of course, they interrogated us every day. And then they took and shipped us to Frankfurt, Germany, which was the place where all prisoners went through this camp. I understand they had 3 camps there, where they put you in there for about a week through interrogation, and then they sent you out to different camps from that position. Now that was a kind of a rude awakening, because all you got there was, in the morning you got hot water, and then that was it. Just hot water.
And what time of year was it now?
That was in March. Yeah, would be the end of March, because you got shot down the 24th. This would have been about the, maybe the first part of April, actually, because we were in Brussels for about a week. But it was still kind of cool, you know.
This concludes part 1 of this 2-part interview with B-17 tail gunner Kelly Martinson. Check out part 2 covering Kelly's POW experience, coming out June 1st, 2024. If you've enjoyed this story, check out my other World War II oral histories on this Air Combat Journal YouTube channel. I try and post 2 interviews per month. Also, please support this channel by subscribing. Subscribing is easy. Just click on the small subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll let YouTube know this is a relevant channel with compelling content. As a subscriber, you'll also get notifications each time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and as always, I welcome your comments. Godspeed.
The plane blew up and I got knocked out.
Welcome to Air Combat Journal. Today's journal entry features part 2 of B-17 tail gunner Kelly Martinson. Part 1 of this 2-part series detailed Kelly's Army Air Corps training as a B-17 gunner and his bailout over Belgium. Part 2 picks up with his capture, forced marches, and internments in multiple POW camps across Belgium and Germany. This is a compelling narrative of a typical B-17 gunner's life as a POW. This is your pilot, John Sermon, asking you to strap in and sit back. Air Combat Journal is ready for takeoff. Interrogation.
Well, we were in a room that was probably 4 feet wide, with a bunk that was probably 2.5 feet wide, and maybe the room was maybe 7 or 8 feet long. And there was just room enough for the bunk and the interrogators to come in. They come in 2 or 3 at a time and try to get you to talk. And I know I just laid on my cot when they come in, and there was a window, of course, in the room, but it was all darkened, so you couldn't see out at all. But they'd come in, and of course you were told to just give them your name, rank, and serial number, which is all we gave them. But from what I learned later, I understand that they had so much information that you wouldn't believe it. They could tell guys where they went to school, and they played football, and who their girlfriend was, and everything else. So they knew more about us than we did. I guess they'd been studying us for years.
Red Cross packages and the highly coveted toothbrush.
It's kind of probably hard to believe, but I saved up my rations from my Red Cross process. Like the 2 money items were chocolate, D-bars, and cigarettes. That was your trading material. And I don't know, I don't remember what I paid for that toothbrush, but I finally got one from an Englishman. This fence was about 15 feet. That fence, we each had our own fence. There was a space for the guard about 15 feet. And I handed the guard so many cigarettes and chocolate bars and stuff, and he gave them to the guy, and he handed me the toothbrush. And it must have taken me a month or 6 weeks to get a toothbrush. I was real happy to get it. Kind of an odd thing, but it shows you what you miss.
Why were you moved so frequently to different POW camps?
Well, they moved us because the Russians chased us out of there. We could hear the guns booming for a long time, for several weeks before they moved us. We had facilities weren't too bad there. Of course, they had the standard wooden bunk with 5 slats in it and a kind of a wood shavings for a mattress, which wasn't very good, but we did have some sports equipment there, and I had always been interested in sports, and I played a lot of softball and football, touch football there. We did a lot of that. That's what I spent most of my time at.
What was the POW housing like?
I think in number 6, I think there was probably maybe 25 in our barracks, and there were 2 barracks in a row separated by a wall, and I think on each side they had about 25, 30 guys. And at the camp after that, up at the Baltic in, camp number 4, pardon me, I think we had about the same amount in a room. We always had double or triple bunks. And like I say, when we got some parcels, Red Cross parcels at number 6, and when we first got to number 4, we got some parcels too, but later on it dwindled. I'm sure the Germans kept a lot of them, and I don't blame them. I'd have done the same thing, I think. But they also had a transportation problem. We were bombing their trains, so they had a good excuse for not getting them to us. So we ended up getting maybe 6 or 8 men to a parcel, and that had to last us for 2 weeks. So you didn't get much.
Not all POW camp transfers were by foot.
When they moved us from Camp 4 up in East Prussia, or Camp 6 up in East Prussia to number 4 by the Baltic, actually I think it was in Poland, we went by ship, and the ship was called Mazaron or something like that, and they loaded us into the hold of the ship, and we had to climb down a straight stairway, and I think that stairway had to be about 25 feet, and we were all sitting down in the hold there in the bottom of the ship. Actually, I suppose the engine room was below us, but might have been on one end too, I don't know, but they just packed us down there like sardines. And we did have some Red Cross parcel food with us. And we were on that ship, I think, for 3 days. And you couldn't have enough room to lay down. You had to lay against somebody or on somebody, and then they in turn lay on you. And the funny part of it was they used to pass us down a water bucket, give us some water. And of course, there had to be, in that ship hold, there had to be several hundred guys. And so you didn't get much water. But then you urinated it and they took it back up. And I imagine they washed it out, but it wasn't very appetizing. And they took us to Stettin, I think was the port they took us to, Stettin, Germany, and dropped us off there. and we took a railroad car to some other point, which was about, I've heard different figures, from 1 to 3 miles from camp. And when we got out the railroad car, one thing kind of funny that happened, that they called roll call, and it came to a guy's name was Koenig, and the German, of course, spoke real good English. He says, "Koenig, hey, you're fighting on the wrong side," he says. I always got a kind of a kick out of that. But there they leg angled us. They tied 2 of us together with leg irons and handcuffs. And they ran us to camp. And they had these young German soldiers that were probably the Hitler Youth, they called them. They were anywhere from, I guess, from 12 to 16 years old. They had them armed with bayonets, and they had the dogs after us, and they bayoneted us. I was very fortunate. I did not get bayoneted. I told the guy I was strapped to, we had to run down it was like running down a meadow where they'd had horse-drawn carts. So you had a rut here and a rut over here. When I saw what was happening, I told the guy, I says, "We got to run in the middle." So we ran in the middle. Neither of us got hurt. But I know one fellow that had, they claimed he had 127 marks in him.
The third and worst POW camp.
Third camp was Nuremberg, Germany. It was the worst camp I was in. The food was just terrible there. And I don't think we ever got a Red Cross parcel there. And they made soup. We called it Green Death. And I don't know if it was made out of some kind of a vegetable that didn't give it much good taste. And I think we got there probably in the middle of February, and we left there early part of April. And I think during that time, I had dysentery for about 6 weeks straight. It was just terrible. The food was just terrible. And another bad thing we had was we had lice so bad there that you couldn't believe it. And well, we used to spend our time every day is we'd take our blankets out, and luckily it was a little bit warmer then than down in south. It was warmer being down south. We'd spend the day picking lice. We'd pick them out and snap their heads and drop them, and spend all day picking the lice out of our blankets. And you go to bed at night and you could feel them jump from one place to the other, bite. Wasn't much fun.
Surviving a forced march to the 4th POW camp farther from the advancing Allies.
Something I forgot to mention is kind of interesting on our march. We always picked one guy to share your food with, you know. We called them muckers. I don't know where the name came from. M-U-C-K-E-R-S. And we'd march for a day, and then we'd hole up in a barn at night. And if we couldn't find a barn, we'd sleep in the outside, out in the outdoors. But most of the time we had barns, except for the first night when it rained. But they had such few guards, and they didn't guard us very well. Once they got us stopped for the evening, they were busy trying to get something to eat themselves, you know. And so I would always walk ahead of the group. Everybody would stop, and I'm sure there was some other guys did it too, but I'd walk maybe a half mile ahead, and I'd try to trade with the Germans for some food. And I remember there was one little house I stopped at, and there was a gal that lived there. I suppose her husband was in the service. And I imagine she was probably 35, 40 years old, I don't know. But the thing I remember so well is she had in the center of her living room, she only had about 2 rooms, but she had a little cage that was just boards on 4 sides about this high, full of young chicks, laying hens, but they were just little chicks. And she was raising them. And she cooked me 2 fried eggs. I hadn't had eggs in over a year, you know. And boy, I wanted to stay there, but I didn't dare. Because if they ever caught you, that was it. And I know I stopped another place where I got into the house. It was a big farm, and I got into the farmhouse. And I was trying to get something to eat from there was 3 or 4 women in there. From them. Another place I'd like to find to stay because they had plenty of food there. But again, I didn't dare. But another occasion I had, I walked into this house and it had a long hallway. The house must have been like about 40 feet long, and rooms on each side. It was like going in almost like an apartment building, but the hallway was only about that wide. And I was way down at the end of that hallway. I knocked on the door, and some German guy came to the door, and I was making motions to him that I wanted to trade for food and stuff. And he says, they were bombing the hell out of him over there. And when he did that, I turned around and walked out. I was all by myself. Yeah. I got out of there.
What things could you use for bartering?
Well, we had some rations with us, you know, that we had kept, cigarettes and chocolate. You just kept those as long as you could, you know. And then when you ran out of that, you'd just beg for food.
Did the German people you bartered with pretty much understand the war was lost and over for Germany?
Yeah, I think they did. I think they did. The only guy that didn't know it was Hitler.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Tell me about your final march.
Oh, that was a great day. We marched from there down to Germany. Down to Moosburg, Germany, which was around 100 kilometers, 120 kilometers. And on the way down there, we must have left camp about the 11th of April. And we got, the first day out, we got strafed by our own P-47s, 3 of them, strafed our column. Now, I didn't see any dead people, but they said they killed three guys. We all hit the ditch. I know I hit the ditch right next to a German, and it was common practice to give him his gun and get back up and get going, you know. He only had probably 1 guard for maybe 75 or 100 men, and these guards were old. You probably could have escaped any time you wanted to, but there was no sense escaping at that time because we knew the war was almost over. Plus the fact if you did escape and you got caught by the SS troopers, they would just shoot you. So the odds were better to stay with the group. The thing I remember most about that trip, I think, other than the strafing, was they told us when Roosevelt died, April 12th. And our column stopped. And I can remember looking way down around the hill and up the line. And you could probably see a mile down the road of our column. All stopped. And they let one of the GIs go up, part way up one of the hills. And he played taps. And that was that was really something to see.
The final POW camp.
Okay, we got into camp down there, and we were living in huge tents. God, I don't know how many people they held, but the tents had to be at least 50 feet wide and probably 150 feet long. So there was a lot of men in there, and you were just sleeping on the ground. And we were, they had all kinds of, different people there, all different countries that were fighting the Germans. I remember one time I went for a walk in the camp, and I got into this one tent, and it was full of these big Arabs. And my God, those guys looked like they were 7 feet tall, black beards. They'd look down at you, and boy, I got out of that tent in a hurry, I'll tell you. They really scared the hell out of me, just being close to them. And of course, they didn't do any talking to them. I don't know if any of them spoke English or not. But
Surviving bully guards and liberation.
we had one German guard that was a mean son of a gun. He was about 7 feet tall, I think. God, he was a big guy, and he had shoulders like this. And he'd wrapped a few heads, I guess. I never had contact with him, but he had a pretty bad reputation. And I understand that, and again, I don't know how true this is, but I understand that when the tanks were coming away, he got a pickaxe in the head. How true it was, I don't know. But it was a wonderful thing. The 51s, they had P-51s, barrel rolled over our camp at about 100, 200 feet. You could see the pilot. And time after time, they barrel rolled over the camp. And of course, everybody was running around, and there was some small arms fire going on, and there was one guy that got hit by a stray bullet. I think he was a Frenchman, but I don't know if any other people had got hurt or not at all. But they surrounded the camp, and then there was a church tower in town. Germans were holed up in there, and I guess they really blasted that thing. So what happened when they opened the gates, a lot of the guys took off and went to town. I went to the nearest GI truck, and I kept asking for anybody from Minnesota. And I ran across a guy from St. Paul. I says, you got anything to eat? He gave me about 20 pork chops. And I took those back to camp, back to our tent. And a bunch of us made a fire and ate those things. I got sicker than hell. You know, the fat, even just the meat would be bad enough, but the fat was worse. And I know when we left the camp, we were liberated on April 29th, 1945, but they couldn't get us out of the camp until May 8th. And they took us out by truck to Regensburg, and then we got on C-47s from there and went back. But that period of being liberated was the greatest thing in the world. It was just hard to explain.
How were you liberated?
We were liberated by Patton's 3rd. I think it was the 99th Infantry. And the way it happened was one night we heard the tanks firing over our camp into Moosburg. That was right in back of us. They came in from the west, as I remember, and the town was east of us, and they fired all night long. You would hear it go just like that, time after time after time. And the next day, we looked out and we saw, I counted 14 tanks coming over the hills. And they got to a certain point, so the German guards just threw their guns and left.
After liberation, getting nursed back to a healthy weight.
I don't know how much I lost actually. I weighed about 180 when I got shot down. And like I say, I just turned 23 weeks before that. And I think when I got discharged, I probably weighed around maybe 120. And when they flew us out of Regensburg on these C-47s, by the way, a guy by the name of Klinger was one of the honchos in our camp, American. He appointed me to have charge of about 30 guys going on the trip back. I was so sick, I was following them from those pork chops. But we got on a C-47, and we were supposed to go to the Lucky Strike Camp in Le Havre, France. I found this out later. Our plane ended up in England. Now, the story was that the pilot got lost. My wife says, yeah, he had a girlfriend in England, which probably is true. Anyway, our plane was the only one that I know of that landed in England. So the first thing they did was delouse us. And then they put us in a hospital. I think we were in a hospital for 14 days, something like that, 14, 16 days. And they fattened us up, got us started. They wouldn't let us eat too much to start with, which was good. And I understand that a lot of guys got real sick in the Lucky Strike Camp. I heard of one guy that supposedly ate 9 or 11 donuts. And he died. He was so hungry that he just kept eating donuts, and nobody stopped him, and he died.
Was the B-17 an effective fighting platform?
I think it was a fantastic plane. It would take a lot of punishment, and you'd see those planes come back pretty well battered up. I've got a picture at home that was in the Seattle paper when we had our reunions out there, our 305th in 1985. It so happened that a boyhood friend of mine lived out there, and he had worked for Boeing. And when this came out in the paper, we had been in contact, and he sent me the paper. And this ship that came back to England all right, the whole nose was gone. The whole nose, right up to the pilot's window. Everything was gone, and he got back. So they would take a lot of punishment. And I thought it was a real good airplane. I didn't know much about airplanes actually until I got to service. I'd never touched the airplane until I got into service, let alone be up in one.
Did you ever go back to Europe after the war?
I've been back to England and to Belgium. And really, we had an interesting trip back there. Our crew, our bomb group went back there. And we had about 6 of our crew that went. And also, the medic that was in our barracks in England, we kind of adopted him to our crew, even though he wasn't a flyer. And we spent a lot of time together. He was with us. And then there was another couple from our squadron. And we went to England, and then the group were making side trips, but we went to Belgium. And I had corresponded with a Belgian person over there who was about 13 years old when we were over there. He had traced our crew because it was near where he lived. Our plane crashed right near where he lived. And we had corresponded for maybe 6 months. And he had taken some lessons as a tour guide. So he guided us around for a week, which was a wonderful experience. And that was in Ghent, Belgium, and Liège, I think they call it, and Brussels. So we went back to see the prison we were in Brussels.
Is it still?
Still a prison, yeah. And he took us back to where our plane crashed. We couldn't get back in there. There was a big oil company there now. So we didn't actually see the crash site. But I saw the police station where they had us holed up in the police station there. And one thing I forgot to mention to you too, interesting. Our one waist gunner, Darius Logan, got in the underground. He was also in a haystack. And the first night he was there, some Belgians came and left a note for him and something to eat. Now I don't think he was anywhere near where we were, but they said, stay where you are, we'll be back to get you at midnight. So he stayed right where he was, and sure enough, at midnight they came and got him. So he lived over there with two different families. He got shot down in March until September when the Americans came through and liberated them. And the Germans would come around and he would pretend he was a deaf mute, one of the family. And they had hiding places for him under the floor, in the well pit, in the barn. Those old, I understand, French and Belgian homes from the First World War had hiding places in back of the stairwell, false rooms or false walls, and they would have a place to hide when the Germans come. And so they hid him out until September when the Americans liberated us. And he had gone back there several times after the war, and they treated him like a king. In fact, they made him honorary mayor of the city. So that was a kind of an interesting thing. He was the only guy that didn't get captured.
Are any of your fellow crew members still alive as of the date of this recording on March 3rd, 2004?
Oh yeah, there's 4 of us left. Goodell, our top turret gunner, Pete Wallach, our bow turret gunner, Bob Sage, our radio man, and myself. Unfortunately, our pilot stayed in the service, got killed in 1946, the year after we got back, in a plane crash. In early 51, our co-pilot, I understand, stayed in the service, got killed in a plane crash in Texas.
Now, were these military planes?
I think they were both military planes, yeah. I don't have any data on them, but it's just from what you hear. And Eddie, our co-pilot, the one that died in Texas, I understand that the plane was headed into town, and he stayed with the plane and steered it away from the town. He's quite a guy.
Do you have any regrets regarding your war experiences?
No, actually, no regrets. People often ask me about it and how I like the experience, and my stock answer is it was $1 million experience. I wouldn't give a damn to go through again.
Kelly Martinson passed away in April of 2006 at the age of 82. He was buried at Fort Snelling National Cemetery in St. Paul, Minnesota, with full military honors. His humble military history and valor live on here at Air Combat Journal. If you've enjoyed this oral history, check out my other interviews on this Air Combat Journal YouTube channel. I try and post 2 interviews per month. Also, please support this channel by subscribing. Subscribing is easy. Just click on the small subscribe button. By subscribing, you'll let YouTube know this is a relevant channel with compelling content. As a subscriber, you'll also get notifications each time I post a new video. Thank you for watching, and as always, I welcome your comments. Godspeed.